Prior to the 7th century, if you built a monument in South India, you built it to eventually disappear. The region's earliest shrines and halls were constructed from wood, brick, and thatch, materials that decayed in the tropical humidity or easily burned to the ground. The Pallava Dynasty couldn't afford to vanish so easily. Locked in a brutal, generations-long conflict with rival kingdoms like the Chalukyas, the Pallavas needed a way to project unshakable, permanent authority. A wooden palace simply wouldn't survive a siege. The solution arrived when King Narasimhavarman I gathered his master architects and commissioned a radical pivot. Instead of stacking bricks, they would carve their royal temples directly out of the region's native bedrock, some of the hardest granite on Earth. This presented a massive engineering risk. Carving into a living mountain leaves absolutely no room for error. A single misplaced chisel strike could fracture a monolithic pillar, forcing the builders to abandon years of painstaking labor. By successfully making the leap from perishable timber to unforgiving rock, the Pallavas guaranteed that their physical monuments would outlast the civilization that built them. They literally set their imperial legacy in stone. The transition to stone began slightly earlier under King Mahendravarman I. His engineers approached solid cliff faces and hollowed them out, creating shallow, cave-like pillared halls known as Mandapas. Soon, the architects grew bolder. Rather than burrowing into mountainsides, they isolated massive standalone boulders on the coastline and chipped away everything that wasn't a temple. These monolithic shrines, shaped like processional chariots, were sculpted from single, continuous pieces of stone. The extreme hardness of the granitic rock dictated these early designs. Because the stone was so brittle and difficult to work, the initial temples featured stout, bulky pillars and relatively shallow sculptural reliefs to prevent the rock from fracturing under its own weight. Over decades of relentless experimentation, Pallava sculptors tamed the granite. They learned to extract deep, three-dimensional forms from the rock, eventually covering entire cliff faces with sprawling, lifelike tableaus of elephants, deities, and complex mythological scenes. The ultimate architectural breakthrough arrived during the reign of King Rajasimha. Freeing themselves from the limitations of a single boulder, builders started assembling structural temples using independently quarried and precisely cut blocks of stone, locked together with mortar. This masonry method allowed them to build upward. Over the central shrine, they erected a towering pyramidal structure known as a vimana, constructed in diminishing, stepped tiers. By pushing granite to its limits, the Pallavas drafted the exact blueprint for what we now call the Dravidian style, a tiered, imposing design that would define South Indian architecture for the next 1,000 years. The Pallavas didn't hide these monuments in isolated valleys. They placed their greatest architectural achievements directly on the coastline, transforming bustling, strategic port cities like Mahabalipuram into brilliant showcases of royal power. Quarrying, carving, and transporting thousands of tons of granite required staggering amounts of capital. The local agricultural economy couldn't cover the bill. To fund their stone empire, the Pallavas looked to the ocean. They developed advanced dockyards and launched massive merchant fleets. Soon, hundreds of ships, guarded by military vessels, pushed across the Bay of Bengal. This map illustrates the sheer reach of their maritime operation. Highly organized merchant guilds exported local spices, cotton textiles, and precious stones, securing lucrative trade deals with kingdoms in modern-day Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and China. Along with their cargo, these commercial ships carried Indian religious practices and artistic styles directly into foreign ports, establishing a powerful cultural footprint across the sea. Perhaps their most enduring export was their unique script. As merchants recorded transactions abroad, their alphabet was absorbed by local cultures, eventually becoming the foundational root for major Southeast Asian writing systems like Khmer, Thai, and Javanese. By harnessing the unpredictable currents of the Bay of Bengal, the Pallavas built an economic engine so powerful it elevated a regional military state into an international powerhouse. Everything the Pallavas achieved culminates at the shore temple in Mahabalipuram. Constructed entirely of locally quarried granite blocks, it sits exactly where the bedrock meets the bay. The complex is arranged in a strict linear orientation. Its main pyramidal shrine faces directly east, specifically designed to greet the rising sun across the ocean each morning. Its towering silhouette also served a highly practical purpose on the water. The temple acted as an unmistakable navigational landmark, guiding foreign seafarers and weary Pallava merchants safely into port. The architectural and economic foundation laid here would eventually be inherited by the succeeding Chola dynasty, who took this exact structural blueprint and scaled it to even more massive proportions. The Pallavas realized that military victories could be reversed, and wooden palaces could rot. By anchoring their architecture in granite and their economy in the ocean, they engineered a legacy immune to the passage of time. Everything the Pallavas achieved culminates at the shore temple in Mahabalipuram. Constructed of locally quarried granite blocks, it sits where bedrock meets the bay. The strictly linear complex features a pyramidal shrine facing directly east to greet the rising sun. Its towering silhouette also served a highly practical purpose on the water. The temple acted as an unmistakable navigational landmark, guiding foreign seafarers and weary Pallava merchants safely into port. The architectural and economic foundation laid here would eventually be inherited by the succeeding Chola dynasty, who took this exact structural blueprint and scaled it to even more massive proportions. The Pallavas realized that military victories could be reversed, and wooden palaces could rot. By anchoring their architecture in granite and their economy in the ocean, they engineered a legacy immune to the passage of time.